In Texas, scenes of land being torn up, fields being wrecked, and lawns being churned apart have now become very common. The culprit is wild hogs, not storms or crop pests. Texas A&M estimates that this state has around 3 million animals, causing more than $670 million in agricultural damage in the year 2024, not including more than $130 million in control costs. Across the entire United States, the U.S. Department of Agriculture says this species causes about $2.5 billion in damage and control costs every year. This is no longer just a matter of hunting a few destructive animals. It is a crisis that humans helped create. Europeans brought domestic pigs to North America. Some escaped into the wild, and some were left to roam freely. Later, they also crossbred with European wild boars that had been imported for hunting. The result was a population that is tougher, more stubborn, faster to adapt, and more powerful at reproducing. Texas became a hotspot because this species originated from domestic pigs brought over by Europeans in the 16th century. Then later crossbred with European wild boars imported afterward. The result was a population that is extremely hard to control, omnivorous, highly reproductive, wide-ranging, and severely destructive. This is a classic example of the kind of mistake that happens when humans interfere with nature and then end up bearing the consequences themselves. The most important point is this: wild hogs in Texas are not native to North America. This problem did not appear on its own. It was brought by humans. Texas Parks and Wildlife and Texas A&M say that Europeans brought domestic pigs over starting in the 16th century as food and livestock. At first, letting them roam or live in the wild was not seen as dangerous, but those very populations later became the foundation for a much larger crisis. The mistake did not stop there. After domestic pigs had already escaped into the wild, humans also imported European wild boars for hunting. When these two groups crossbred, they created a population that was stronger, smarter, wilder, and better able to survive in nature. From that point on, the issue was no longer just a few lost farm animals, but a highly invasive species that humans had unintentionally created. Texas also turned out to be an almost ideal place for this species to explode. This state is extremely large, with plenty of grassland, farmland, brushland, rivers, streams, and large private properties that are difficult to fully control. One study from Texas A&M once estimated that about 79% of the state's land area is suitable habitat for wild hogs. Combined with abundant food, water, and hiding places, Texas almost became the perfect environment for them to thrive. In other words, Texas was not weak against wild hogs. Texas was simply too well suited for what humans had created. One of the main reasons this problem escalated so quickly is the biology of the species itself. The U.S. Department of Agriculture and Texas A&M both describe wild hogs as one of the most highly reproductive large mammals in North America. Female hogs can begin reproducing at around 6 to 8 months of age. Gestation lasts only about 115 days. Each litter usually has 4 to 6 piglets, but it can be higher. And under good conditions, a population can produce multiple litters within a short period of time. They live in family groups called sounders, which can range from a few animals to several dozen, while adult males often split off and live more alone. When a species that is omnivorous, highly adaptable, and fast reproducing like this is placed in an environment with abundant food and cover, a population explosion is almost inevitable. That creates a very big difference in terms of management. If you only see 8 or 10 hogs in one night at the edge of a field, it is very easy to think you are dealing with a small group. But in reality, that is only the visible part of the population problem. One sounder may come back the next night. Another sounder may cross over from the neighboring property. An area that was just cleared can be reinvaded if the surrounding region does not act at the same time. And if control pressure is not continuous, the numbers can recover far faster than normal intuition would suggest. This is the point where the problem moves beyond the logic of isolated hunting. It becomes a question of population, behavior, and space. When we say an ecosystem out of control, the meaning is not simply that too many animals are showing up. The meaning is that a creature humans helped create has started operating on its own like an expanding system, exploiting the very ecological and agricultural infrastructure humans built. It uses crop fields as feeding grounds. It uses river and creek corridors as travel routes. It uses scattered private properties as safe buffer zones. It uses suburban edges as pressure points against human life. From that perspective, wild hogs are no longer just a destructive herd of animals, but a biological force, exploiting the weak points in the way humans organize land. The consequences now appear at every level. At the agricultural level, wild hogs do not just eat crops. They root up soil, destroy levees, damage fences, disrupt planting schedules, and increase the costs of seed, labor, and fuel. Texas A&M says agricultural losses in Texas have exceeded $670 million, and landowners also have to spend more than $130 million on control efforts. Those numbers show that biological risk has turned into large-scale financial risk. At first, humans brought in a species for practical use. In the end, humans themselves have to pay hundreds of millions of US dollars just to slow the level of destruction it causes. At the ecological level, the problem is far broader. The Department of Agriculture clearly states that wild hogs disturb soil, muddy water sources, put pressure on habitat, compete with native wildlife, and also carry disease risks for livestock, pets, and humans. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service says wild hogs can carry at least 30 diseases and nearly 40 parasites, including some major concerns for the swine industry. That means this is not just a story about damaged crops. It is also a story of biosecurity, disease risk, livestock supply chain stability, and the long-term sustainability of local ecosystems. An initial mistake in introducing a non-native species into the environment has now become a layered pressure on the entire system. What is especially striking is that wild hogs are no longer confined to the image of being a rural problem. Guidance materials from Texas A&M now include specific content on managing wild hogs in residential areas, small urban zones, and even school grounds, showing that the pressure from this species has moved right up to the suburban edge. When a state has to publish scientific guidance for dealing with wild hogs on school grounds or sports fields, that is a very clear sign that the problem has moved far beyond a few isolated farms. A species humans brought in and unintentionally strengthened has now entered the everyday living space of humans themselves. At first, humans responded in the familiar way, setting simple traps, hunting individual animals, using dogs to chase them, building fences, and increasing night patrols. These methods had some effect, but Texas gradually realized they only created pressure at isolated points. Wild hogs could leave one area, move to another, and then return once the pressure dropped. That was when people understood the old methods were no longer enough. Texas A&M also says small box traps are only suitable for catching a few animals. If they are triggered too early, the remaining hogs become wary and much harder to catch later. At the same time, wild hogs live in sounders, so if the entire sounder is not captured, control becomes much less effective. For that reason, Texas A&M prioritizes corral traps, meaning large enclosure traps, and emphasizes that the gate should only be closed once the whole group is used to entering. From there, Texas began using tools that were stronger and more precise. One of the most notable was smart traps, with cameras, phone connectivity, night imaging, and real-time monitoring. Texas A&M describes the model of human-activated traps, meaning the manager only closes the gate when they can see that the entire sounder has entered the trap. This was a shift away from chance-based trapping and toward using data to improve the odds of capturing the whole group. Texas also did not stop at smart traps. In very large and hard-to-reach areas, they used helicopter hunting, meaning aerial shooting from helicopters. Texas A&M says one such operation can remove about 31% of a target population in a single flight. And later, operations can increase that percentage even more. This is not a perfect solution, but it is very powerful for quickly reducing numbers across large areas. In addition, there is thermal hunting, meaning hunting with night vision devices or thermal imaging to detect wild hogs at night. At a more controversial level, Texas has also discussed or used poison bait in very limited ways under strict legal regulation. Texas A&M notes that not every toxic bait can be used freely. The Texas Department of Agriculture even classifies warfarin for wild hogs as a state limited use pesticide, meaning only people who meet legal requirements can buy and use it. In the long term, Texas and its partners have also researched sterilization or reproductive control to slow the population's ability to recover. That shows how serious the problem has become. Humans are not only trapping or hunting, but are also considering interventions in the reproductive capacity of this species. From smart traps, helicopter hunting, thermal hunting, and poison bait, to sterilization, Texas has had to test a whole series of aggressive measures to confront a species that humans once helped explode. By this point, Texas realized it did not lack action. It lacked a system. The issue was no longer how many hogs they could shoot today or how many they could trap tonight. What mattered more was where the sounders went, where they fed, where they sheltered, and which areas they moved through. This was the moment Texas shifted from reacting point by point to seeing the problem across space as a whole. Texas gradually understood that wild hogs were not a normal hunting problem, but something closer to wildfire management or disease control. To reduce damage, they had to know the travel routes, gathering points, escape points, and the links between different areas. Without data and real-time tracking, humans would always stay one step behind. So Texas did not look for one single super weapon, but built a layered control system instead. The first layer was monitoring through trap cameras, mobile connectivity, and real-time tracking. The next layer was control tools, such as large corral traps, organized hunting, and in some cases, tightly regulated chemical measures. After that came spatial coordination between multiple landowners so they would not fight isolated points one by one. And finally came long-term research, such as reproductive control. Put simply, Texas understood that a problem created by humans could only be reduced by a system that humans also redesigned. Even with technology, the gap between theory and reality remains very large. A smart trap does not become effective on its own just because it has a camera. Texas A&M notes that sounders need time to get used to a trap, often requiring pre-baiting for many days, sometimes even more than a week. If the trap is closed too early, the group can become trap shy, meaning wary and likely to avoid traps later. So, technology does not replace patience. It only helps humans be patient at the right moment. The same is true for data. One camera placed at one corner of a field only gives fragmented information. Many cameras that do not share data with each other are still not enough. Only when those pieces are combined into one shared picture, when the sounders appear, which direction they move, and how they change routes, can the system respond early. At that point, the issue is no longer just technology, but coordination between many people and many properties. Within that system, each tool is only effective when used in the right place. Corral traps work where the sounders already know the path. Mobile cameras help prevent the trap from being closed too early. Aerial hunting fits areas that are extremely large and hard to reach. Thermal imaging helps detect them at night. Chemical methods, if used at all, are controlled very tightly by law. And reproductive control remains a long-term direction that is hard to apply on a wide scale. Texas A&M also emphasizes that aerial hunting cannot stand alone. Without traps, monitoring, regional coordination, and sustained pressure, the population can recover very quickly. The key point is this: the most powerful technology is not always the most effective technology if it is not part of a system running in sync. And even when that system works well, it still may not completely eliminate wild hogs. This species reproduces quickly, moves widely, and takes great advantage of the environment humans have created. So humans may reduce numbers, reduce damage, and slow the spread, but it is very difficult to bring the problem down to zero in a short time. When the measures began working together, the results became much clearer. Texas gradually built a more structured response system guidance for rural areas, small properties, urban zones, and school grounds. Training, monitoring, advanced traps, coordination with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and continuous research. Put simply, Texas moved from a situation where people had to handle the problem on their own to one with a more professional management system. But that does not mean Texas can eliminate wild hogs completely. Even the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service sets a more realistic goal: reduce damage, stabilize the population, then lower it. When done correctly, the clearest benefits are fewer cases of replanting, less unexpected damage, and more control for landowners. Over the long term, it also helps reduce soil disturbance and ease pressure on suburban edges, parks, and public spaces. Even so, control does not mean a permanent ending. The population can rise again if the pressure drops, and other areas can still be reinvaded. Every tool has limits in cost, manpower, legal restrictions, and risk if it is used the wrong way. So what Texas has achieved is not total eradication, but a reduction in the damage caused by a crisis that humans themselves once helped create. The story of Texas shows one thing very clearly: invasive species do not appear on their own. They often begin with human intervention. Humans bring that species in, let it escape, and then unintentionally make it stronger. By the time the consequences grow beyond control, humans have to use science, data, and many aggressive measures just to try to reduce the damage. This is not just a story about wild hogs. Many modern environmental crises unfold in the same way. At first, there is an impact that seems small, then the problem escalates because the response is slow and scattered. In the end, gaining control requires a system that is expensive, slow, and extremely strict. So what stands out in Texas is not only the roughly 3 million wild hogs or the hundreds of millions of US dollars in damage. What stands out even more is the lesson behind it. When humans create an environmental crisis, fixing it is often far harder than making the original mistake in the first place.